Hi, I'm Jay Thomas, and welcome to Bald Tires. Have you ever seen pictures of a prototype car in a magazine or maybe on the internet and thought, man, I'd love to get a chance to drive that or even just have a look at it in person? Well, today, my guest is a guy who's gotten to do just that for his career. Jim Kerr joins me. He's an automotive journalist and he's been published across all of Canada. We're going to talk about his career, what got him into cars in the first place, all of the experiences he's had, some pretty cool tales. On top of his career as an automotive journalist, Jim has also been an instructor, an automotive instructor at Sask Polytechnic, teaching generations of mechanics. He's got some great stories from that career as well. Next episode, Jim's going to return to talk about a couple of cool cars, a 64 Impala SS and a 57 Ford Thunderbird, both sitting in his garage with us right now. You're listening to Bald Tires, because when you make great memories, you make bald tires. Well, I find myself in another amazing garage, and my guest today is a guy who, if you've picked up a paper in Saskatoon or Saskatchewan, even a paper across Canada, you may have well seen his name. Jim Kerr joins me right now. Jim, thanks for joining me.
Hi, Jay.
Thanks for coming on the show. This is going to be a lot of fun. Now, you are a member of AJAC, the Automotive Journalists Association of Canada, and you've been an auto journalist for a long time.
Probably about 25 years.
25 years. And that's been a pretty cool job. We're going to get into that in a little bit, too. You're also a former instructor, retired from that job now, right?
Yes, 4 years.
At Sask Polytech, or if you go back to the way we all used to call it, Kelsey, right?
That's right. I still think of it as Kelsey.
You were in auto technical training, right?
Right, yes.
So tell me what that all covered. Like, you taught everything?
We taught from the beginners to senior technicians that are in the automotive industry.
Yep.
And I ended up teaching everything there from fuel injection to transmission overhaul.
And auto body?
No.
Never auto body?
I never taught auto body.
Okay.
Yeah. I took some courses in auto body, and of course, over the years working on cars, I've learned a fair bit myself.
Yeah,
but,
yeah. You just stuck to the sort of more mechanical aspect of it.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty cool. So, yeah, like I say, if you've picked up a paper, you know that you've been in the column in the Saskatoon Star Phoenix. You've been in other papers all across Canada, right?
Yes, yeah. Winnipeg, Halifax, Nanaimo, some coast to coast.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. We'll talk about, a bit of those, each of those pieces of your career as we kind of go forward. But take me back, Jim. Sounds like you've been a car guy for a long time.
I have most of my life.
Yeah?
Yeah.
We're looking actually, sitting right next to me. I'll kind of hold it up. You can hear it there. Looking at kind of call it a toy.
You thought they were poker chips.
Exactly. From your childhood. And they are from the Jell-O company. Now, they are wheels. They look like poker chips, but they are Jell-O wheels, little plastic discs, but they look like a car wheel. And they say on them, save all 200 picture wheels. The Jell-O brand desserts company. And they all have a number on the other side of them in a little picture. And there's all these. How many of them are here?
There's 200 of them.
There's 200. And you collected every one of these.
Well, with help. There were neighbors helping, my grandmothers, my mother. We ate Jell-O till we were sick of Jell-O. So.
Okay, so do you remember sort of what year these came out?
1961, 62 was when they came out. Yeah, and you bought a package of Jell-O, and there was one of these car wheels, we call them, in each package of Jell-O.
So you managed to get all 200, but you must have had repeats and doubles of certain ones too,
oh, yeah,
right?
Yeah, you could buy 6 packs of Jell-O, and they'd all have the same number wheel in them. So you tried to trade where you could, but there were only a few people collecting them. So
these are fascinating. I mean, have you ever heard anybody else who has these or seen another collection of them?
I've never seen another collection other than online. If you go online, you'll find some for sale.
That's really cool. They're numbered obviously 1 to 200, and every sort of stack has a different color. And then there's this little holder that they all sit in, but it looks like a poker chip holder. It sort of has vertical slots, columns that they all slide into. And they're all in series. So the first series is 1900 to 1909, and there's 1910 to 1919, so forth, so on, up to 1960.
61.
Right. So, and a different car. In fact, number 1 is right in front of me, and it is the Cugnaut. Now, you have to kind of know your automotive history to know what that is, but It's basically the first self-moving vehicle in the world, right?
Right, yes.
Besides a train, like not a
there
locomotive.
were steam trains there.
There were steam trains, but this is a steam-powered vehicle. It's got 3 wheels, and it moved on a road.
Right, yeah. And most people would have no idea, But going even to the newest ones, which in 1961, a lot of people don't even recognize those cars.
That's right, because that's ancient history now as well, right? I mean, here's the other stack, number 176, a 1960 Cadillac. I mean, that's a classic just now. So, and of course, Jell-O was a thing in the 50s and 60s, like it was a phenomenon, right?
Oh, yes. Everybody made Jell-O desserts.
And Jell-O everything. There was savory Jell-O dishes too that used Jell-O in to make salads and all kinds of weird stuff, right?
Right, yes. Vegetable salads, Jell-O salads.
Jell-O molds that stacked on top of each other, all sorts of things, right?
I might be able to find one for you if you really want one.
Making me want Jell-O. Yeah. But that's pretty cool. So I mean, that was something you did as a kid, collecting these things.
Yeah.
But
and actually after that, they came out with airplane wheels.
Oh, really?
And there were 200 of those as well. And but they weren't as popular because people didn't know airplanes back then like they knew cars.
Yeah, only maybe the guys who had been through the war knew a few of those airplanes, right?
Yeah.
But kids wouldn't have known all of them, right?
No, but cars you could see on the street.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. What's your first automotive memory? Like what would you think was the defining moment that made you a car guy?
Oh.
If I was to ask you that kind of a complicated question.
Well, my grandfather was a blacksmith and became a licensed mechanic, way back when they first put licensing for mechanics into the Saskatchewan.
Okay.
And so I remember being in his garage and seeing old cars. I've still got some of his books that I read when I was young, like he was into rewinding generators,
right,
and starter motors and even heater motors, because you couldn't buy parts, you had to rewind them.
Right.
So I've got books on rewinding these motors. And one of the books I've got is 1917, Modern Wireless and Telegraphy, How to Fix Radios.
That's interesting. So, okay, hanging around in Grandpa's garage, do you think that did the trick for you?
Well, that was part of it. I remember I was probably about 7 or 8 years old, and we plowed mud for a couple hours to get out of the farmyard and headed to the sports car races at Davidson.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, there was an old airbase strip there, and there were many triangular airstrips in Saskatchewan, and they ran sports car club races out there.
Oh, neat.
Yeah, we stood in the rain all day watching these cars race around the track. So
cool. Okay. So you collect this Jell-O thing. When you go to get your license, I'm sure you were the kind of kid who probably was there right when you were 16.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Like I was too.
But I'd been driving for years. Growing up on the farm, it was, I remember being in the farm truck, a 52 International, and Dad pulling the choke and the throttle out, the throttle, I should say, just out a little bit. And I'd steer the truck, and he'd walk along beside and throw bales on the back while we were picking. And when I needed to stop, you just turn the key off. And when you wanted to go, you turned the key on because it was in bull low, and away it would start and chug away.
The starter would just take it off from a start and go.
So I've been driving since, I was probably 5 or 6 years old.
Gotcha. So let's fast forward, though, to your first car. What did you drive when you went for your license?
I drove a 64 Chev 4-door sedan with a 3-speed standard transmission on the column and a 6-cylinder engine.
The kind of funny thing is we're sort of sitting next to something just about like that.
I've had many 64s over the years. I think I'm up to like 28 or something.
28. Okay, so just to take you through this, of course, I'm in another amazing garage. Jim's garage has got, to my left and to his right, a 64 Impala SS. Black with a red interior. It's just gorgeous, and it's just about complete, right?
Yes,
You're getting just about done. And to my right is a car that I've gotten to know pretty well from another experience, a 57 Ford Thunderbird. It is red with a white interior. Like, these colors are sensational in here. I love it. The way you and I met was we actually sang together in a choir.
Yes,
Saskatoon Choral Society. And then a couple years later, I was doing a show with the Saskatoon Summer Players. Was doing Grease, and we needed a convertible. We needed something hot. So I called Jim, and he was nice enough to lend us the 57 to be a prop on the stage. That kind of moved on and off.
Oh, it was fun.
That was, you know what? We had so much fun with this car there. That was so cool. And for a car to be pushed onto the stage in the middle of a play, a musical, kind of wowed the whole audience. Anyways.
I still remember after the play, we parked the car out front, and we just sat there and let people have pictures inside the car, and they were just thrilled to see it on stage and then actually be able to be in the car and get their picture taken.
That was fantastic. So yeah, I'm in another cool garage, obviously. Sorry, I digress, because we have a 64 Chev right next to us, right?
Right.
And you went for your license in a 64.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So, but you said a sedan. So
Yes.
4-door?
4-door sedan.
Yeah. 3-speed on the column.
Yes, my dad's car.
Yep. Passed the first time?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Well, if I hadn't, I think Dad would have been disappointed because, at that point in time, I'd been hauling grain out of the fields on the run, for years.
So you were an experienced driver by that point. That's
Yes.
good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what did you make your first car that was actually yours?
My first car that was actually mine was a 61 Chevy Nomad station wagon,
Oh, cool.
loaded with everything.
Really?
Yes. Yeah. It was. I bought it off a minister with 80,000 miles on it, and I sold it when it had over 300,000 miles on it.
Holy cow. Really?
Yeah.
That's impressive.
It was probably the best car I will ever own.
Really?
Yes, reliable, stable, even decent fuel economy for way back then.
Yep. Did you drove it through rest of high school kind of thing?
No, I bought that just after I got out of high school.
Okay. Yeah.
Before that, I drove some other cars, but my grandma's 61 Comet station wagon. I liked station wagons.
Yeah. You know what? Station wagons are totally making a comeback. They
Yes.
are completely. And now they are actually worth quite a bit of money too. I think a lot of them just didn't survive.
Right,
They
yes.
were the workhorses. This 2-door, SS. I mean, people kept these because they knew it was a special car. But a station wagon, a 64 Chev station wagon, was just a workhorse, a family hauler, and then it was worn out and gone, right?
Yes, yeah.
Nobody bothered to keep them.
You just parked it at the back of the yard and left it.
Yeah, and it rotted to nothing or eventually went to scrap, right? Like that was it. So to find them now is kind of getting, I want to say it's probably a little more difficult to find parts for a wagon.
Yeah, but the wagon was great for getting people into the drive-in.
I bet it was, yeah. They didn't check in the back? They didn't have the flashlight looking at?
No. I had curtains in mind, all the way around. Yeah. Oh, it was fancy. I put curtains in it, and I had curtain behind the front seat because I drove it in the wintertime. And it was so hard to keep the whole wagon heated when it's 40 below.
Yes,
so
yeah.
I just had the curtain that slipped behind the back or the back of the front seat, and it would keep the front seats really warm.
It's pretty creative. Okay, so this wagon you had, you took it everywhere, obviously.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Like, did you go to school in it, post-secondary or anything like that? Or
No, actually, I was teaching at the time. So
Oh.
I was using it for work.
Really?
I drove between different schools in a school unit, and that was my mode of transportation.
So you were a teacher before you were an instructor then? Like you were
Yes.
what I would call a elementary school teacher, high school teacher, something like that?
Actually, I taught grades 5 to 12, and you might find it hard to believe, but I taught music.
No, I believe you. You're a good musician. That's cool. Yeah. So was that your first choice then for a career? Like what led you to from there into the automotive side of things?
Well, I was always interested in cars
Yeah.
and so on, and I think the first vehicle I actually worked on was a 1916 Chev truck.
Whoa.
That we had. It was the old farm truck, and it had been parked for years, and they were wood cabs, and everything had rotted and falling apart. And I said to my dad, "Can I take that apart?" And he said, "Sure, do whatever you want." So I took the engine apart, mostly the whole top end, and never did get it back together. In fact, it's still sitting out in the pasture at the farm.
Really?
Yes.
That's funny. So, but you were a teacher for a while, and then tell me how in life you transitioned to getting into automotive journalism and getting to be an instructor with the auto stuff at Kelsey.
Well, cars were always a hobby.
Yeah.
I'd drag race at the drag strip, and I liked high performance cars, and so I thought I should learn more about it. So I went and actually took a course at Saskatchewan Institute of Applied Science and Technology, now known as Sask Polytechnic.
Right.
And when I finished my course, I was offered a real good job out of there. So
Oh, really?
I took a job and I ended up with my journey license in automotive technician.
Cool.
From there, I was coming out of one of the sports car club events at one time.
Okay.
And a lady approached me that was a member in the club and said they're looking for somebody to teach some night classes up there, just in basic car care. And I thought, why not? It'd be an interesting way to meet people and help young people starting to drive.
Yeah, sure.
So I started doing that. And one night I was walking out from class about 10 o'clock at night after I'd cleaned everything up. And the dean of the industrial division was walking down the hallway, stopped and took a look at me and says, "We're interviewing for a position tomorrow." He said,
Really?
"Yes." And he knew me from different things, but he said, "It's just a temporary position for 3 weeks only. Would you be interested?" And I said, "Sure, why not?"
Yeah.
And so I went in the next morning and interviewed, and they hired me on the spot for 3 weeks. 37 years later, I left.
Holy. So it just snowballed one thing into the next,
Yes,
basically.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
cool. They wanted to have you around, obviously.
Well, it worked out well. It really did. And I had a very good career there. And I figure I had probably about 15,000 students.
15,000. So chances are, if you've gone through the Polytech course, because you retired, you said 3 or 4 years ago, right?
Yes.
Something like that.
Yeah.
But before then, you would have had contact with all those students that have all become mechanics or done different automotive stuff around the province.
Yeah. The terrible thing now is they still recognize me, but I don't recognize them in most cases. Some I do, but, they change a lot from the time they're 19, 20, 21 to being 45.
That's right. Your hair falls out, you drink a few more of these and you get a beer gut. And
You're talking about me, Jay.
Cool. So let me ask you this then. So to become an automotive journalist, share that story with me. How did you get into that club, or what led you to that?
Well, again, it was just a fluke. It was another nice lady that...
I got to meet some of these.
Yeah, that I was a member of the sports car club, and she was approached to see if she could write some articles for the paper.
Okay.
By the automotive editor there. And she said no, she wasn't any good, but she thought, I know somebody that might be. So she recommended me, and I met up with the editor, and I said to him after lunch, I could probably write 3 or 4, and by then I'd be out of ideas and so on, but we'll give it a try. And so I started writing articles, and 25 years later, it was weekly articles every week, sometimes 2 or 3 a week.
That's pretty cool. Now at that time when you started, that was for the Saskatoon Star Phoenix.
Yes. Yeah.
And at that point in history, like what year are we talking roughly? What do you think?
Oh, that was back in the early 90s.
Early 90s. So they had their own automotive column, in fact, automotive section of the paper.
Right.
But it was locally produced then at that point?
Yes, it was locally produced.
So now stuff is shared amongst a lot of papers, right?
Yes, yeah. In fact, I think everything comes out of Toronto now for...
It's changed a little bit with how that
mostly
works.
wire surface stuff.
Yeah, exactly. But you were one of the team here in Saskatoon. And then how did you apply to become part of the Association of Canada, the AJAC part?
Another friend just recommended me. You had to have a couple people recommend you for membership, and you had to be publishing in newspapers, or newspapers were the only thing really
at
online
the time. I suppose maybe a magazine.
A magazine, some wrote books and so on, but newspaper were the most common. Yeah. And so I was sponsored, and I joined, I think, back in 95.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So if anybody, I'm sure listening now has heard of AJAC. You heard of the AJAC Awards. Like, have you been part of the team to pick those cars?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We go down east, and the manufacturers supply all the new vehicles for that year, and we test drive them over a course over several days, and then we vote, and it's all blind voting. So nobody knows who the winner is until it's actually announced.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, so this is where I think you probably have 1,000 stories, Jim, because like so many cool things have happened with being part of the Automotive Journalists Association of Canada. Like, walk us through this. When you got started with them, at that point, were they sending you vehicles all the time? Is that how it worked then?
They started sending me vehicles after I joined.
Yeah.
I've had hundreds of vehicles over the years here in Saskatoon, but I also traveled to other places to test drive vehicles. So
Yeah.
that was really neat.
I remember when we were singing together at the time in that choir, I was always asking you, "Hey, what do you got this week? What did they send you?" So as it would work is it would come from out east, right?
Right.
And they would get the latest. Sometimes even models released before they had come to dealers. Is that true?
Oh yes, yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
you got to
many
drive
times.
stuff that wasn't even really for sale yet.
Oh yes, yeah, many times. Especially if I traveled to another location.
Yes.
The vehicle might not be released for most cases, usually a month or two, but sometimes I drove vehicles that wouldn't be released for 2 or 3 years.
Wow. So you probably had to sign a lot of agreements
Well,
limiting what you could talk about with those things, right?
There are embargo agreements.
Embargoes, yeah.
And so if you don't follow the embargoes, you soon don't get invited to drive any of these vehicles.
I bet.
So it's kind of a mutual respect thing.
Yeah.
But I also made friends with many of the engineers because of my technical background, and we spoke the same language. And they quickly realized when I started asking questions about things that most people don't ask questions about, and that I knew something about it. They would tell me things that normally they're not supposed to talk about.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but I always kept them to myself. I used them as kind of background information to help develop stories.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you give me an example of like what was your favorite unveiling that you ever went to? Because I mean, you must have gone to hundreds of these things where you traveled to different parts and got to see these new cars. What's a memorable one that stands out in your mind?
Oh, that's a tough one. Maybe the Jaguar S-Type.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah, which was in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
The unveiling of it. We actually went out and drove the vehicle through some beautiful countryside and so on. I remember having supper on the presidential launch.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
So they'd arranged this, and there's the presidential emblem on the floor in the carpet and so on. And this was the launch. It was available for charter when the president wasn't using it, and they chartered it, and we had lunch as we motored down the river.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Now, some of these events, like you got some. I've heard you've kept some of the swag you've been given. There's been some pretty neat presentations with some launches of some new vehicles, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah. And, well, most of it is press kits.
Right.
Yeah, and press kits have changed big time over the years. It used to be we'd get a full-size binder that's about 3 inches thick with pictures and tape. And in fact, I've got an example on the shelf over here. But now everything's online.
Right.
Yeah, and we went from big binders to CDs. Then we went to thumb drives, and now everything is just online.
For a big press release like that.
So I've kept a few of the more interesting ones around.
Give me an example.
The 1998 New Beetle launch.
Yeah.
Yeah, it came in a yellow box, and it's got the actual photographs of the new Beetle, and there's slides, if people remember slides, and so on. It's got all the write-up about it. There is a bud vase inside. Many people wouldn't know, but when you bought the new Beetle, there was a little plastic bud vase on the dash.
Yes.
And it came with a plastic flower in it.
Now that is because the original Beetle had an accessory that you could buy.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah, there were bud vases on the B-pillars.
On the B-pillars that you
Right.
could buy and attach and that sort of thing. And when they released the new Beetle, I mean, it was it really did make headlines at the time, right? Like it was such a revolution because it was mixing old with new, and there wasn't a lot of companies at that point that had done a lot of that yet, right?
No, that was pre-economy car days.
Yes, right. And that new Beetle was just, I remember I was a kid and I remember going in to see the new Beetle at the Volkswagen dealership and getting one of the first brochures. And even the brochure was very European. It had sort of translucent paper in it, and the pages did sort of different tricks. And I think I still have it actually, but you got a press kit that with a vase in it, and like they were going for a big splash with this.
Right, and there's a little metal holder in there so you can set it on the table and put the bud vase in it, just to remind you of your new Beetle.
That's pretty cool. Oh. So, traveling all across North America, did you ever go to Europe for a press release?
I've had offers to go there, but just time-wise, it wasn't worth it. And I know many people that do travel like that, but it's not as glamorous as you think, because you're on a plane for 14 hours. Mm-hmm. You get off, you drive vehicles for maybe 6 hours, you sleep overnight in a hotel, and you're back on a plane for another 14 hours. So.
It's not a vacation. Yeah, I suppose you're right. I want to go back for a second. You talked that you got to talk with a lot of engineers on some of these cars and such. Mm-hmm. Could you give me an example? Was there ever anything that you can take credit for changing on a vehicle?
Yes.
I want to hear that story.
Oh, okay. Well, we were driving the new Lincoln Aviator.
Oh, the one that has recently come out?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. It's only been on the market, 2 years, I think? 2
years,
right?
Yeah. And it's got automatic cruise control in it. Distance sensing cruise control will stop behind cars.
Lane keep assist, all those things, right?
Yeah. And one of the features is it reads road signs. And so the cruise, you set it at 100 kilometers per hour. If the road sign changes to 110, the cruise will automatically step up to 110 kilometers per hour.
Okay, yeah.
Well, you can fine tune it. Let's say that you want to drive a little slower than that or a little faster. You could put in, I want to drive on the information system. You could put in, I want to drive 10 kilometers per hour faster. Mm-hmm. So if the speed limit's 100, the vehicle would actually cruise at 110. Okay. Or you could even set it, I think, up to 120 kilometers per hour if the speed limit's 100.
Yeah.
Which is fine maybe on the highway at 100 kilometers per hour, but when you came to a school zone at 30 kilometers per hour, it was still 20 kilometers per hour over.
Oh.
Which is a serious offense.
That is. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So we came back and said, it's a neat feature, but rather than do it in miles per hour or kilometers per hour, why don't you do it in percentage?
Oh.
Yes. So now I can set it so that it's 2% over or 5% over, and it doesn't matter what the speed limit is. It's only going to be over by that little bit, or less than that by a little bit.
Right. So if you only have it at 2%, you're really only going to be going 51 in a 50 zone.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Or even less in a 30 zone. So but 2% at 100 kilometers an hour is going to be 102 or whatever, right? So it'll save you from that sort of thing.
That's right.
Yes. That's smart.
So we talked to the public relations person about this here, and he got on the phone and talked to the engineers, and they said, "Oh, that's a software change, and we can do that quite easily."
Really?
So that's been implemented,
and they put it into production.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Another example was. It was Hyundai.
Okay.
And we were driving one of their vehicles on the West Coast, and the cup holders and the cigarette lighter or power outlet interfered with each other.
Oh.
So, and they, for some reason, hadn't twigged on this, but we had our phones plugged in.
And then you couldn't put a cup into the cup holder.
That's right. So we talked to them about it, and these were pre-production vehicles, or they were coming out in about a month. And they changed it before the production vehicles came out.
Really?
So they are responsive to input.
Really? That's interesting. Do you think it was because you were an automotive journalist, or do you think companies ever consider the public's opinion with some of this stuff?
Oh, I think they definitely consider public opinion. They do all kinds of surveys and have people driving these vehicles beforehand and so on. But unless you just use them in day-to-day type situations, you sometimes miss things.
Yeah, an example is I've got a Honda CR-V as a daily driver, right? And for me, it's perfectly comfortable. But when I got the vehicle, I joined the Facebook group, and there's an online web forum and stuff like that, all based in that car. And a lot of people said, "Oh, you know what? I really want like just another 2 inches added to the armrest. You know, like a lot of people complained that the right armrest just wasn't quite long enough to keep your elbow on it and still grab a hold of the wheel. Like it was too short. And I wonder if say a company ever, reads that online or takes that into account. Do you think they ever?
I think to change when it's already in production is pretty difficult.
Yes.
It's very expensive.
Yes.
But the next generation or next redesign of the vehicle, I think they would consider it.
I would suggest, and I could probably even say I could see that because that generation of vehicle that I have, I'll say the headlights are kind of poor. They're a single bulb dual filament in them, and they're they're not great. Mm-hmm. The next redesign of that, so same body but just a refresh on it, they changed to have quad headlights, an actual separate high and low beam headlight bulb, which work 1,000 times better. I've driven one and was like, wow. Well, they did such a better job on this. They clearly listened, actually.
And sometimes they just make a mistake that's overlooked. I remember test driving a Dodge Club Cab several years ago.
Okay, yeah.
And I hopped into the front seat and adjusted the seat for me. And I'm fairly tall, so I had the seat quite a ways back. And then I wanted to see what the rear seat legroom was in this Club Cab. And they're fairly small in the back for a Club Cab. So I hopped in the back and I closed the Club Cab door.
Yep.
And I'm sitting in the back. Yeah, checked out the legroom. It's tight. I go to get out, and the door handle opens into the side of the front seat, and it won't open far enough to let me open the door. I'm stuck in the back of this Club Cab, and nobody else is around.
Oh, boy.
So, I've done a couple similar things, but it was, there I was, climbing over the back of these front seats to try and get out of this truck.
So they kind of missed the mark with the door handle on that one.
But it just, depended on the position of the front seat, and I just happened to have it in that position where...
So if you would have had a short person driving, it
No
would have
problem.
cleared the seat.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's interesting. Now, without having to name names or cars or things like that, have you ever had a vehicle that you got to test drive that you actually despised? Did that happen very often?
Not very often that I despise. I've had vehicles that have had problems.
Yeah.
Yeah. One fairly popular European make, I had top-of-the-line vehicle that I had to have towed 3 times in a week.
Whoa!
Just because of electrical system problems.
Wow.
Another vehicle, another manufacturer, air suspension problems.
Oh, yeah.
And people might think of the new Dodge
Ram
pickup, but it wasn't one of those.
Oh, really?
No.
Okay. Yeah. Everybody knows the Ram problems around here. Yeah.
And I just talk to the manufacturers and say, this may not be typical of the vehicle. If you want to ship me another vehicle, I'll test it. And if it's the same thing happens, then that's going to be in my story. If it's not the same thing, then, you've got to temper it because there's always a vehicle now and then it has problems.
Well, sure. Yeah. I mean, you just get one that had an issue. I don't know if you call it, being built on a Friday or, just one series of that part were incorrectly produced, right? That can happen too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And with electronics and electronic modules, you never know when something is going to fail on it that is no fault of the manufacturer. Electronics fail all the time. Take a look at new TVs.
Yes.
Or fridges.
Yeah, they're well known for failing now. But on that topic, let's talk about that for a second. Because I had this conversation with my dad recently, and I'm actually impressed, though, with electronics in cars for the most part. Because think about what some of the electronics in your modern vehicle go through, the extreme heat and the extreme cold, and they tend to keep working. Especially more modern ones, But there are still, vehicles from the 90s driving around with electronic fuel injection systems, and those computers are still working.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And they haven't failed because of the weather.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Well, when you take a look at electronic components, there's actually designed a lifespan into some of these here.
Okay.
I shouldn't say designed. There is a lifespan for some of them. And they might build 1 million resistors.
Yep.
And they'll test them. And not sure exactly how they test them, but the top percentage will go to companies like NASA and so on, where they can't have failures. You
Right,
know,
right.
These things are, if it fails, you know, there's a backup system and so on. But
we're talking, spaceships are depending on this working.
and that resistor might cost you $100.
Okay.
Well, the one beside it didn't test so well. It might be sold for 17 cents.
Okay.
And there's a variety in between. So there is kind of a predicted lifespan for many of these components. And automotive electronics, they tend to buy higher end electronic components.
Yeah. And I mean, it probably varies by company as well, because there are certainly some automotive companies, let's just say, are, not as well known for their electronics lasting or being dependable, but there are certainly ones that are, right?
Yes, yeah.
And I think for the most part, you're going to find them fairly reliable. I just think that it's impressive that even in our cold that we can get a car to start, never mind the mechanical side of it, just the fact that the electronics all work. But if you leave your iPhone or your cell phone outside at minus 30, it doesn't work anymore.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So they must still do things to protect these components or water seal them and all kinds of stuff, right?
Oh, yeah. And in many cases, it's not the components themselves, it's usually the wiring.
Oh.
But in the last few years, the type and style of connectors and the way they're sealed and so on has gotten so much better that even that's an improvement.
I heard, though, that there have been some companies that have used, like, I don't know what you call it. It's a new biodegradable kind of wiring, and the mice are really going after it.
Yes, yeah.
Like it's based on soy or
soy-based insulation.
Right.
So it's the vinyl that you see around the wire itself,
the metal wire,
to protect it so the wires don't short together and so on. And there's several companies that are using it. It's environmentally it's very good.
Yeah.
Except that rabbits like it, mice like it. Yeah.
Oh,
I was just down at the lake last week, and there's all kinds of little bush bunnies around.
Yeah.
They will go underneath the vehicle and start chewing on the wiring harness because it tastes good, and you have to get your vehicle towed to
oh my gosh.
the garage. So,
holy cow, really?
They may be cute, but they're not welcome.
No kidding. What do you think about, while we're on the topic of wiring, I had a vehicle, a 99, that, probably 10 years later was actually having wiring issues in the hatch that opened, the wires that constantly flexed back and forth. Eventually the coating broke down on them and they shorted out.
Right.
Do you think that this new wiring will do that, or have they gotten past those issues with most manufacturers?
There are different grades of wiring.
Yeah.
Different types of insulations and so on. There's high temperature insulations. The wiring that's inside, if it's braided, it's much more flexible and so on. Solid core wire would break very easily if it's being flexed.
Right.
Most of the wires we see now in vehicles are multi-strand, but anything that has to move, such as a tailgate and so on, if it was replaced with a braided wire, it's much more flexible and it would last forever.
And it wasn't even the wire inside that broke. It was simply the coating broke down, on the wire and the vinyl coating. And then once it sort of flaked off, those bare metal, wires connected with the body or other wires and just shorted out. So,
but you take anything that's plastic in your house and set it outside in the environment for, 10, 15, 20 years, the plastic usually just shatters if you touch it. So the insulation is good, but it's got a lifespan.
And there must be grades, though, because there's certain brands that don't seem to have that issue, even 25 years old, and other brands that have that issue, right?
And that's one of the reasons when I'm wiring my own vehicles is I've collected wiring harnesses from vehicles over the years, stripped them apart and taken the wiring out of it and use that to wire my own vehicles simply because I know it's good wiring automotive rather than just a roll of wire you buy off the shelf someplace.
Right. Makes sense. So you're part of AJAC. You're still part of AJAC. You're still writing some stuff, right?
Yeah.
And they're sending you cars all the time. What do you think was your favorite car they ever sent you, Jim? What was the best experience you ever had with a car they sent you? Because, I guess we'll explain to the listeners, you work out of Saskatoon, and a car would simply arrive from out east by rail, correct?
Right.
And you'd pick it up at the rail yards and spend your time with it, and then you would take it back, and would it go further west yet? Is that how it worked?
It could go east or west,
Okay.
depending on which way it's going to another journalist.
Yeah.
Some of them come by rail, some come by truck.
Oh, okay.
Others are delivered in person.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's a company that actually drives vehicles from city to city and delivers them in person.
Fascinating.
Yeah, that'd be quite the job.
Wouldn't it? That wouldn't be so bad at all. I'll sign up for that.
And, my favorite one, I think maybe a Porsche.
Oh,
Yes, Guards Red with tan interior.
perfect.
Cayman S.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's got the front trunk and it's got a rear hatch for cargo. So, and although there was a 2012 Cayman R, which was very limited production.
Yep.
And they're actually selling now more than what they were new.
Really?
Yes.
Was that Cayman S that you had manual or automatic?
It was manual.
It was manual.
Yeah.
Perfect.
The automatics are so good these days.
They are. Yeah.
And for the average driver, and they're actually faster than the manual transmissions as far as acceleration and shifting and so on. But I just love the feel of a manual transmission.
Okay, yes, totally. I mean, while we're on this topic, I got to drive a Cayman S for a week a couple years ago as well, 2018, I want to say, maybe it was 19. It was for the Saskatchewan Hospital Home Lottery. It was an early bird prize. And my former job working in radio, I got to drive it for a week and kind of demo it around town and talk about it. But it was the automatic, and I mean, I think it's a dual clutch in that thing, right? So
Yeah.
the shifts are just lightning fast, but that had even the automatic, that car had so much feedback, through the wheel. It was so well damped, but yet you had feedback through the suspension, and there was just almost nothing like driving that car,
Yeah, yes, you're paying a lot of money for it, but it's been put into suspension design really in the car, because you get the handling plus the ride comfort. Where there are other cars out there, the Honda S2000, you could compare that to the car, to the Porsche, which handles every bit as well, but it's a firmer ride, so it's not as comfortable.
It's a little bit harsher,
Yeah.
right? Totally.
Yeah.
That was a super fun car, and I'm with you too, because yes, the automatic is faster technically, but it's all about the feeling. I think that's why we drive, really, right? I think that's why we drive what we drive with classics and whatever else we choose.
Well, car people are passionate about what they drive.
Yeah, right. And for me, it's not really. I mean, yeah, it's cool. Numbers are great. Those are kind of fun bragging rights. But that kind of wears out, and that's kind of a shallow thing. I myself would much more interested in what it feels like to drive that car. Like I would pick the manual as well.
Yes.
So you lose a half a second or whatever on your 0 to 60 time, or maybe 3/4 of a second. Or if you're terrible at rowing the gears, you lose a couple seconds. But
We kid that it's an anti-theft device because very few people can drive a manual transmission.
Well, they're just not common. You know this even more than I do, I'm sure. But how many cars do you think we have left new on the market that have a manual? There are a dozen or two,
It's
at
very,
most.
very rare.
Right?
Yes. Even the high-performance sports cars are mostly automatics now.
That's right. I mean, I know Jag is gone. Porsche, you can still get one, right?
Even like Corvette, most of those are now automatics.
They're mostly automatics.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And it's almost going away in the economy cars now too. Do you know that the newest Honda Civic, for example, only the hatchback is going to have a manual?
Yeah.
The sedan won't even come with one. It's not even an available option. And the Honda Fit is gone, so there's no manual in that left. They got rid of the manual in the Honda Accord, for example. But, Toyota's only got a couple left that have manuals, and Mazda's only got a handful left, and even the cheap stuff is gone.
But it's a small percentage of the population that ever bought manuals in the last decade. So it's hard to justify building a separate manual transmission and all the related stuff that has to go into the car for such a small percentage of the population.
You got to hope that there are car people that work at car manufacturing companies. How has that been with your experience? And the reason I'm getting at is that I think that, like, say, a company like Toyota or Honda or Mazda, they must have car people working for them to still go after that market? Somebody inside loop that is still pushing to have a manual transmission be sold, right?
I think there are definitely some.
Yeah.
Mazda is a great example where I've driven many of their sports cars and so on, even their sedans. You know, they've got manual transmissions, and but Mazda in California, their engineers and technical people mostly race.
Oh, really?
Yes, they're out on there's Mazda Laguna Seca racetrack.
Yep, right.
Yeah, and many of them road race out there all the time.
So that must be part of what keeps Mazda in that sort of sporty, call it the sportiest out of the regular, everyday vehicles. It's almost like Mazda has gotten to that level now, sort of a place where Honda used to be about 15 or 20 years ago. But out of all the imports, you could almost call Mazda sort of the most sporty handling of all in every class of vehicle that they sell, right?
I'd have to agree.
Yeah.
But the engineers on the racetrack, they want that feedback into their steering wheel,
Yes.
into the seat of the pants kind of stuff. And then when they hop into their their everyday car, they miss that. So they want to kind of put that back in, but still keep the ride comfort.
Yeah.
And they've done some amazing things. One of their things with their steering is just steering stability going around corners.
Okay.
And it's a software program written into the computer that you would not even know is there.
Really?
Yeah, there's no on-off switch. There's nothing there. But when you go around a series of corners on a sweeping highway,
Yep.
it just stabilizes the car ever so slightly so that you don't have those little tiny steering inputs all the time to correct going around the line.
Really?
Yeah, and it just makes the car smoother and less tiring to drive. Even for passengers, it's less tiring because you're not bracing against the movement of the car.
Is that something that you got to pick up at a press release, or were you able to learn that from people actually talking to Mazda engineers?
I learned that talking to Mazda engineers about it and the software and so on. But then I actually got to try it in vehicles where they took videos of us with the steering wheel inputs and so on, with the system turned on and then with it off. They had dual computers in the car that they could just switch between.
Huh.
And on the same course and so on. And you could see that when it was switched on, the steering wheel movement was very, very slight and very smooth. And with it switched off, there was always just little tiny corrections.
Wow.
But they don't advertise that in their sales brochures or anything.
No.
It's a fact of driving the Mazda, how you feel about it.
See, you've got such a lucky perspective when it comes to a lot of this stuff. That's just one example. There must be hundreds of things that you've gotten to learn that nobody else really gets to know about. Well, that's pretty cool.
Other people learn about it too, but I think my technical background allows me to correlate it maybe better than a lot of people because I'm a technician who learned to write.
Okay.
Where others are writers that are learning about the technology.
Yeah, and that's probably more common in the field.
Oh, yes.
Right? Yeah. Like you probably stand out in that way. Like I say, most people probably are interested in being journalists and are interested in cars, but don't necessarily have all of the technical know-how that you have.
Yeah, there's probably, I don't know, maybe half a dozen across Canada that really are into the technical end of things.
Of course, too, you got to grow up in a fantastic, I'll say time when, at that time when you were growing up, you could take a car and work on it and learn about it and those things. I even feel that kids these days, we will struggle to keep the car community alive, or we'll struggle to keep guys and gals interested in cars because there's so many fewer things you can do yourself now, in your own shop, in your own garage, on your new car.
Yes, but it's changing.
You think so?
Yeah, they can now hook a laptop up and go in and modify some of the things on vehicles.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
So it's a different type of technology that we're dealing with. They may change injectors where we used to bolt a different carburetor on.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Okay.
And so on.
Yeah.
They're still into wheels and tires.
Yeah.
Not just the look, but the handling improvements and sway bars and those.
Yeah, I suppose suspension, technology has gotten better, but it's still a lot of the same similar components or
Right.
same kind of work that you're doing when you're taking things apart and putting them together.
Yeah, and the manufacturers in most cases have compromises. They have to build a vehicle for grandma to drive as well as the enthusiast.
Yeah.
And so there's compromises in there, and changing things like shock absorbers or struts and sway bar sizes and so on. You can make significant improvements to even a brand new car, just to tailor it to your driving style. But it takes some research and sometimes trial and error.
Yeah, I bet it does, right? The good thing is, though, that with the internet community that's out there, generally there's somebody that's done it already.
Yes.
So you can ask somebody else, so what did you do? And what were the results, and you can get a lot of feedback that way.
Yeah.
And there's an online community of some kind on Facebook or on somewhere for just about every car out there.
There is. I've been doing some research. I've got a 67 El Camino.
Yeah.
And I want to upgrade the suspension on it because when you go into a corner with it now, it's a marshmallow trying to... and so on. But there's a whole online community and manufacturers that make suspension parts for them that will make them handle almost like a brand new car.
Yeah, no kidding. And you can really change things if you want to as well, right?
Oh, yes.
I mean, you can really customize things on an El Camino should you want to. But I mean, I'll take it as an example. I've got a Honda Fit, tiny little economy car. It's a blast to drive, but there is a huge online community across the whole globe, especially in other countries in Asia and stuff, where, I mean, there's aftermarket parts galore for it, and everybody's done 1,000 different things to it. So sky's the limit with some of that stuff.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I've seen Toyota Echo.
Yeah.
The old Echo with performance parts on it from other parts of the world because the price of fuel was so high there that they couldn't afford big cars or so on, but they could have the handling goodies, the styling goodies.
Yep, they could take that Echo and turn it into the sports car they wanted, right?
And there were even turbocharger kits for them and so on.
That's crazy, hey? That's crazy. So these days, you still get cars that come to you?
I've had some recently.
Yeah.
Over the past year, it's been pretty quiet just because of restrictions in transporting cars, travel between provinces
All
and
that,
so on.
yeah.
But in the last few weeks, I think I've had 5 vehicles. So
Holy cow.
yes, it's back online again, back in the stream.
Yeah. If people want to find more of what you've written, where do they go?
Probably Halifax Chronicle Herald.
Okay.
Be quite a good place to take a look.
Yeah.
Winnipeg Free Press.
Okay.
Yeah, it'd be another place
Awesome.
to find some of the stuff.
Okay, very cool, very cool. Jim, we're going to have to leave it right there for right now. You know what? Next time, let's get you back on the show, and let's talk about a couple of cool cars right beside us. This 64 black Impala SS, just about done, ready for the roads, and that beautiful 57 Ford Thunderbird beside us as well. Thanks for joining us in the meantime and listening. You can always find more podcasts like this, jthomasauto.ca. You're going to see pictures up there of what we're talking about today, too. And yeah, more to come with Jim next time. I'm Jay Thomas. This is Bald Tires.